In the early years of Adolf Hitler's rule, before the Second World War engulfed Europe, the Schutzstaffel, better known as the SS, was already transforming from a paramilitary police force into something far more formidable. By 1933, the SS had begun to develop a specialized military branch, one that would ultimately become infamous across the world, the Waffen-SS or Armed SS. At first, this embryonic fighting force existed under the title SS Verfügungstruppe, meaning troops at the Führer's disposal. The term reflected their purpose precisely. They were to serve wherever Hitler himself commanded, loyal not to the German state or army, but personally to the Führer and his ideology. This distinction would shape their identity and their fate throughout the coming war. The SS Verfügungstruppe was organized and trained along military lines, yet it stood apart from the traditional German army here. Its formation was the result of Heinrich Himmler's vision, a force that would fuse political reliability, racial purity, and military excellence. By the late 1930s, regiments or Standarten had been organized under this concept. When Germany embarked on its first acts of aggression, the Verfügungstruppe was there. They marched into Austria in 1938 during the Anschluss, and then into Czechoslovakia in 1939, taking part in these early conquests alongside the regular army. In these operations, they gained both confidence and valuable experience, serving as the armed hand of Nazi expansion. In the months before the outbreak of war, these SS units received intensive military training to bring them closer to the standards of the Wehrmacht. They were molded into well-disciplined, motivated formations, part soldiers, part political warriors. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, the SS Verfügungstruppe went to war for the first time. Their performance in Poland was brutal and effective, though marred by numerous atrocities committed under the guise of security operations. Alongside them, elements of the Totenkopfverband, the Death's Head units, responsible for guarding concentration camps, were also sent into combat, an ominous sign of the blurring line between military operations and political terror. In the months that followed, these regiments were reorganized and expanded. From their ranks emerged larger formations, brigades, and eventually divisions that would later form a foundation of the Waffen-SS, the military branch of the SS. The regiment Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, originally Hitler's personal bodyguard unit, was among the first to evolve into a full division bearing his name. Two other regiments, Deutschland and Der Führer, combined to form the Verfügungsdivision, which would later become the Das Reich Division. The Totenkopf units, drawn from concentration camp guards, were transformed into the Totenkopf Division. These three divisions, Leibstandard, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, became the core of the Waffen-SS, the nucleus around which a vast and fearsome organization would grow. By 1939, the transformation from an elite political guard to a militarized fighting force was complete in form, if not yet in scale. The stage was now set for the next phase of evolution, the expansion of the Waffen-SS into a multinational force bound by ideology rather than nationality, a development that would redefine its nature and reputation in the years to come. When the guns of war erupted over Poland in September 1939, the SS Verfügungstruppe, soon to be known as the Waffen-SS, entered a new era. No longer a ceremonial guard or political force, it was now a combat-tested military arm of the Nazi regime. Its soldiers, bound by loyalty to Hitler and indoctrinated with National Socialist ideology, faced their first true test on the battlefield. From political guard to military formation, the campaign in Poland revealed both the potential and the peril of the Waffen-SS. On one hand, its troops demonstrated aggression, zeal, and determination that impressed some Wehrmacht commanders. On the other, their lack of experience, disregard for military discipline, and brutality toward civilians provoked criticism even from within the German army. Reports of atrocities, including mass executions of Polish civilians and prisoners, stained the reputation of these political soldiers. Nevertheless, the leadership of the SS regarded the campaign as a success. Heinrich Himmler and his deputy, Paul Hauser, a former general of the regular army and one of the principal architects of the Waffen-SS, were convinced that their experiment in creating an ideologically pure military force was viable. Building the Armed SS. During the winter of 1939 to 1940, the SS undertook a major reorganization. The units that had fought in Poland were expanded into brigades, and by the spring, they were large enough to form full divisions. The SS Verfügungstruppe was officially renamed the Bewaffnet SS, meaning Armed SS. Soon after, it received the title by which history would remember it, Waffen-SS. Three primary divisions emerged from this reorganization. Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, Hitler's personal guard turned elite combat unit. Das Reich, formed from the regiments Deutschland, Der Führer, and Langmark. Totenkopf, built from concentration camp guards of the Death's Head units. These divisions represented the backbone of the Waffen-SS. Their training combined conventional military discipline with relentless ideological conditioning. Recruits were taught that they were not mere soldiers, but crusaders fighting for the destiny of the German race. Ideology and racial doctrine. Unlike the Wehrmacht, which emphasized professionalism and obedience, the Waffen-SS sought to blend political fanaticism with military skill. Its members were to embody the Nazi ideal, physically fit, racially pure, and absolutely loyal to Hitler. The SS enforced strict racial standards, selecting only those deemed of Nordic or Germanic descent. Every soldier was subjected to intense ideological indoctrination. They were reminded constantly that they were fighting not merely against enemy armies, but against what the regime portrayed as the racial and political enemies of Germany, Jews, Slavs, Bolsheviks, and others considered inferior. This ideological foundation would later lead to the Waffen-SS's direct involvement in some of the war's most horrific atrocities. Early campaigns: Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. By the time the Western Campaign began in 1940, the Waffen-SS divisions were better trained, better equipped, and more confident. Their earlier experiences in Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland had served as laboratories for refining their methods and organization. In Poland, the Waffen-SS fought as an auxiliary to the Wehrmacht, often under direct army command, but maintaining its distinct chain of authority through Himmler. The division's aggressiveness and willingness to fight with little regard for casualties were praised by Nazi leadership as proof of their superior spirit. Yet, many regular army officers viewed them as reckless and politically dangerous. Preparing for expansion. As the war in Europe expanded, Himmler saw the Waffen-SS as both a political tool and a military necessity. It was to serve as the Führer's personal army, parallel to, but distinct from, the Wehrmacht. At the same time, it offered Himmler an independent source of power within the Nazi hierarchy. To support the rapid expansion of the SS, new training schools were established to produce officers and non-commissioned leaders steeped in both combat tactics and ideological commitment. Recruits were drawn from across Germany and the annexed territories, each one selected according to strict racial and physical criteria. By the summer of 1940, as Germany prepared to invade Western Europe, the Waffen-SS was poised for its next great test. The division's Leibstandard, Das Reich, and Totenkopf stood ready to take part in the campaigns that would sweep across France, the Low Countries, and beyond. The stage was set for the Waffen-SS to prove itself on the grandest scale, yet, against the professional armies of Western Europe. By the spring of 1940, Adolf Hitler's armies were preparing for a bold new offensive, one that would bring down Western Europe in a matter of weeks. For the Waffen-SS, this campaign was to be a proving ground. Having fought under army supervision in Poland, the SS divisions were now determined to demonstrate that they were not merely political fanatics, but soldiers equal or superior to the Wehrmacht's best. The Western offensive begins. On May 10, 1940, German forces invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. Among them marched the three principal SS formations, the Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, the Totenkopf Division, and the Verfügungsdivision, later Das Reich. Each unit had been expanded, re-equipped, and reorganized after the Polish campaign, boasting greater numbers of vehicles, artillery, and support elements. The Leibstandard, still officially a motorized regiment at the time, advanced rapidly through Belgium and northern France, often operating alongside panzer divisions. Its commander, Sepp Dietrich, a trusted companion of Hitler since the 1920s, demanded ruthless aggression from his men. The Leibstandard soldiers quickly gained a reputation for their ferocity, often fighting beyond their assigned objectives. However, their zeal also led to controversy. Reports soon emerged of summary executions of prisoners and civilians, particularly in Belgium. Such incidents foreshadowed the brutality that would later become synonymous with the Waffen-SS. The Totenkopf Division's debut. The Totenkopf Division, under Third Reich, had an especially notorious background. Drawn largely from concentration camp guards, the men who had enforced terror in Dachau, Sachsenhausen, and other early camps, the division embodied the fusion of ideological fanaticism and military purpose. When the Totenkopf took to the field in France, it lacked experience but not enthusiasm. During the fighting near the La Bassée Canal, and later around Arras, the division displayed determination under fire. Yet it also suffered appalling casualties due to poor leadership and reckless tactics. Despite this, Nazi propaganda heralded its performance as heroic proof of SS courage. One of the darkest incidents occurred at Luparity, where members of the Totenkopf executed nearly 100 captured British soldiers. The massacre became one of the most infamous war crimes committed during the 1940 campaign. The rise of Das Reich. Meanwhile, the Verfügungs division, composed of the regiments Deutschland, Der Führer, and Langmark, distinguished itself during the push through Belgium and into northern France. Commanded by Paul Hauser, it operated more effectively than the Totenkopf, combining professionalism with ideological zeal. Hauser, a seasoned army general before joining the SS, sought to instill traditional military discipline into his men while retaining the ideological edge demanded by Himmler. Under his leadership, the division proved a capable fighting force, aggressive but tactically sound. Its success in France earned it a new name, Das Reich, the Empire. A dual reputation. The Waffen-SS's role in the Western campaign was paradoxical. On the battlefield, its divisions demonstrated courage and mobility, often spearheading assaults or holding critical positions under fire. They won praise from Hitler and Himmler for their valor and unwavering loyalty. Yet among professional soldiers in the Wehrmacht, the SS remained controversial. Many army officers viewed them as politically dangerous amateurs who lacked proper respect for military convention. The high casualty rates in some SS divisions were seen as the result of reckless leadership and ideological fervor rather than sound tactics. Still, Hitler was impressed. The performance of his SS troops in the West convinced him that they could stand alongside the best army divisions. He ordered their continued expansion, providing them with better equipment and prioritizing them for new recruits. A turning point in identity. The Western campaign also marked a turning point in the identity of the Waffen-SS. No longer merely a collection of elite guards or politically loyal units, it was now a recognized combat arm of Germany's war machine. Its success opened the door to further growth, and to the idea that the Waffen-SS could become an international army of Germanic warriors, drawn not only from Germany, but from across Nazi-occupied Europe, toward a Germanic Empire army. In the months following the fall of France, Himmler began implementing his grand vision, the creation of a Germanic Waffen-SS, an elite multinational force embodying Aryan unity. Recruitment began in the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and other occupied regions, targeting young men deemed of Nordic descent who were sympathetic to National Socialism. 2 new regiments, Nordland and Westland, were formed from these volunteers. Together with the existing German regiment Germania, they would soon be united into a new division, Viking. This formation symbolized the shift from a purely German SS to a pan-Germanic army, a racial ideal translated into military reality. A force set apart. By 1941, as Hitler prepared for his next and greatest campaign, the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Waffen-SS had established itself as a distinct and growing pillar of the Nazi war effort. It combined military ambition with ideological extremism, bound by personal loyalty to Hitler and driven by Himmler's dream of a racially pure warrior order. The upcoming war in the East would both fulfill and destroy that dream. It would be the proving ground that elevated the Waffen-SS to legendary status among Nazi propagandists and condemned it forever in the annals of history. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941, it marked the beginning of the largest and most brutal campaign in human history. The invasion of the Soviet Union was more than a military operation. It was an ideological crusade. To the Nazi leadership, this was a war of annihilation, aimed not only at conquering territory, but at destroying Bolshevism and reshaping the racial order of Europe. For the Waffen-SS, this was the war they had been created for. Steeped in racial doctrine and indoctrinated to see the conflict as a fight for survival between Aryan and Slavic civilizations, the SS divisions entered the Soviet Union as both soldiers and instruments of ideological terror. The SS divisions march east. 4 of the most prominent Waffen-SS divisions participated in the invasion. Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Totenkopf, Viking, the newly formed division of Germanic volunteers. Each division was heavily motorized and equipped with the best weapons Germany could supply. Their commanders, Sepp Dietrich, Paul Hauser, Theodor Eicke, and Felix Steiner, were among Himmler's most trusted and fanatical officers. From the very first days of the campaign, the Waffen-SS distinguished itself through its ferocity and speed. In Ukraine, in the Baltic states, and on the approaches to Moscow, SS units fought with determination, often in the most difficult sectors of the front. They were praised for their courage under fire and their refusal to retreat even in desperate situations. But their battlefield reputation came at a terrible moral cost: ideological warfare and atrocities. The Waffen-SS was not merely fighting the Red Army, it was carrying out the ideological mission of the Nazi state. The invasion of the Soviet Union unleashed a campaign of unprecedented brutality. SS troops, acting in cooperation with the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads, participated in mass executions of Jews, communists, and suspected partisans. The Totenkopf Division, under Third Reich, was especially notorious. Its men, many of whom had served as concentration camp guards, brought the methods of terror they had learned in the camps to the Eastern Front. Entire villages were burned, civilians executed, and prisoners of war massacred under the pretext of anti-partisan operations. The Leibstandard and Das Reich divisions also participated in cleansing operations, destroying settlements believed to be harboring partisans. Such actions blurred the line between military necessity and genocide. For the Waffen-SS, this was not seen as excess, but as duty, a continuation of the ideological war they had been trained to fight. Hard lessons in combat. Despite their fanaticism, the SS divisions faced severe challenges in Russia. The vastness of the terrain, the resilience of the Soviet defenders, and the brutal weather tested their limits. Many units suffered heavy losses from exhaustion, frostbite, and logistical shortages. During the advance toward Moscow in late 1941, the Leibstandard and Das Reich fought in desperate conditions. When the Soviet winter counteroffensive began in December, these divisions were pushed back along with the rest of the German army. The Waffen-SS suffered thousands of casualties and was forced to learn hard lessons in endurance and tactical flexibility. The Viking Division, composed largely of foreign volunteers from Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Flanders, performed relatively well in its first campaign. Despite being less experienced, it displayed remarkable cohesion. Its multinational makeup symbolized Himmler's dream of a pan-Germanic crusade against Bolshevism. The Waffen-SS and the German Army. Although the Waffen-SS technically operated under the command of the German Army, OKH, its relationship with regular officers remained uneasy. Many professional soldiers resented the SS for its political influence and its tendency to take credit for victories while disregarding military protocol. Nevertheless, Hitler and Himmler favored the Waffen-SS for its loyalty and ideological reliability. As casualties mounted on the Eastern Front, the Führer increasingly turned to the SS divisions to lead counterattacks or hold critical positions. Their willingness to fight to the last man became both their greatest strength and their downfall. Rebuilding and reorganization. By the summer of 1942, the Waffen-SS divisions that had fought through the first year of the Eastern Campaign were severely depleted. The Leibstandard, Das Reich, and Totenkopf were pulled back from the front to refit and reorganize. During this time, they were upgraded from motorized infantry divisions to Panzer Grenadier divisions, and each was reinforced with a Panzer regiment, a privilege not extended to equivalent army divisions. This transformation, driven by Himmler and SS General Paul Hauser, marked the birth of the elite SS Panzer Corps, a formation that would soon rival the best armored units in the Wehrmacht. In France, the rebuilt SS divisions trained for a new series of operations. They received new tanks, half-tracks, and artillery, becoming some of the most powerful mechanized formations in the German military. But as they recovered their strength, the war was already beginning to turn against Germany. A dual legacy. By the end of 1942, the Waffen-SS had achieved what its founders had envisioned. It was a full-fledged military arm, ideologically committed, fiercely loyal, and respected for its combat prowess. Yet it was also deeply implicated in war crimes and atrocities that went far beyond the norms of warfare. Its soldiers saw themselves as a racial elite, guardians of a Nazi revolution. In reality, they had become both the spearhead and the executioners of Hitler's war in the East. The next phase of the conflict would push them to their limits, on the frozen steppes of Stalingrad, in the forests of Kharkov, and in the desperate battles that would determine the fate of the Third Reich. By 1942, after a year of ferocious combat on the Eastern Front, the Waffen-SS stood at a crossroads. The early enthusiasm of rapid victories had faded into the grim reality of endless fighting, brutal winters, and mounting losses. The divisions that had marched triumphantly into the Soviet Union were now battered, their ranks depleted, their equipment worn out. Yet from the ashes of these early campaigns, the Waffen-SS began its transformation into a fully mechanized armored force, the elite SS Panzer divisions. This evolution would turn the Waffen-SS into the most formidable component of Hitler's war machine, rivaling the best formations of the regular army. Rebuilding the SS Fighting Corps. After the winter of 1941-42, Himmler ordered the exhausted Waffen-SS divisions withdrawn from the front lines to rest and reorganize in occupied France. There, under the watchful eye of SS General Paul Hauser, the divisions Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf were rebuilt from the ground up. The reorganization was ambitious. Each division was to receive a full complement of tanks, armored infantry, artillery, and support units modeled after the Wehrmacht's panzer divisions, but with one critical difference: the SS divisions would be larger, stronger, and better equipped. This transformation reflected Himmler's growing influence. He envisioned the Waffen-SS not just as an auxiliary to the army, but as an independent military order, bound by loyalty to Hitler and the racial ideals of National Socialism. From motorized to mechanized. Previously, most SS formations were classified as motorized infantry, troops who rode to battle in trucks but fought on foot. The new SS Panzergrenadier divisions, however, were equipped with armored half-tracks and supported by their own tank regiments. This upgrade gave them greater mobility, firepower, and endurance. Unlike many Wehrmacht units suffering from supply shortages, the SS divisions were given priority access to new weapons and vehicles. Their prestige within the Nazi hierarchy ensured that they received the latest versions of tanks like the Panzer IV and later, the formidable Tiger. By mid-1942, the three rebuilt divisions, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, had been designated the core of the new 2 SS Panzer Corps under Hauser's command. They were soon joined by another powerful formation, the Viking Division, composed of volunteers from across Nazi-occupied Europe. Training and indoctrination. The training regimen in France was intense and uncompromising. Physical endurance, tactical skill, and ideological commitment were drilled into every recruit. Officers were expected to lead from the front, sharing the hardships of their men, a tradition that earned the Waffen-SS both admiration and staggering casualty rates. At the same time, ideological education remained central. Soldiers attended lectures on racial science and the mission of the Germanic peoples. They were taught that they represented a new warrior elite, loyal not to a nation, but to a racial ideal and to the Führer himself. This combination of fanatical loyalty, discipline, and aggressive spirit produced troops who would fight with extraordinary tenacity, but also commit atrocities under the justification of ideological duty. The Eastern Front calls again. By the summer of 1942, as Hitler launched his ambitious drive toward the oil fields of the Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad, the Waffen-SS divisions were ordered back to the Eastern Front. The re-equipped Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf entered combat once again, now operating as armored spearheads within Army Group South. They performed with distinction in numerous engagements, often serving as fire brigades, rushed to plug gaps in the German lines or to launch counterattacks against Soviet breakthroughs. Their aggressive tactics earned them a fearsome reputation among both friend and foe. Yet the tide of war was beginning to turn. The Wehrmacht's overextension and the Soviet Union's resilience soon forced the Germans onto the defensive. The encirclement and destruction of the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad in February 1943 marked a turning point. Kharkov, the SS counterstroke. In early 1943, amid the chaos following the Stalingrad disaster, the Waffen-SS seized its moment to shine. Under the command of General Paul Hauser, the 2 SS Panzer Corps, comprising the divisions Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, was ordered to retake the city of Kharkov, which had fallen to the Red Army. The operation became one of the Waffen-SS's most famous victories. In a series of bold maneuvers between February and March 1943, Hauser's armored divisions encircled and destroyed several Soviet formations, recapturing Kharkov in mid-March. The campaign demonstrated the tactical flexibility and offensive power of the SS Panzer divisions at their peak. For Hitler, the victory was a propaganda triumph. For Himmler, it was proof that his SS troops could rival the Wehrmacht in skill and surpass it in determination. The Waffen-SS ascendant. In the wake of Kharkov, the Waffen-SS reached the height of its prestige. The divisions were lauded in Nazi propaganda as the Führer's firemen, elite troops who could be trusted to reverse any disaster. Recruitment soared, especially among young Germans eager to join the seemingly invincible SS Panzer units. Foreign recruitment also accelerated. Volunteers from across Europe, Dutch, Flemish, Danish, Norwegian, and even French, joined the ranks, inspired by the myth of the Waffen-SS as the vanguard of a united Europe fighting Bolshevism. By the end of 1943, the Waffen-SS had grown into a massive force of nearly 400,000 men, organized into more than a dozen divisions. What had begun as a small, politically controlled guard unit now stood as a multinational armored army, a force of iron and ideology. The rise of the SS Panzer divisions represented both the military and ideological zenith of the Waffen-SS. They had proven themselves capable of large-scale, coordinated armored warfare, and their loyalty to Hitler was absolute. But this transformation also deepened their complicity in the crimes of the Nazi regime. The same units that fought brilliantly at Kharkov had also participated in reprisals, massacres, and scorched earth operations against civilians. Their battlefield prowess could not be separated from their role as agents of ideological war. As 1943 came to a close, the Waffen-SS stood at its most powerful and its most dangerous. The following summer at Kursk, it would face its greatest test yet. By mid-1943, the Waffen-SS had reached the peak of its military power. Its armored divisions, Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Totenkopf, and Viking, were the pride of the German war machine. Hardened by years of combat and rebuilt with the latest tanks and weapons, these divisions stood ready for Hitler's next great gamble, Operation Citadel, the assault on the Kursk salient. This battle would mark both the zenith of the Waffen-SS and the beginning of its decline. Operation Citadel, the last great German offensive. In the summer of 1943, Hitler ordered a massive offensive to eliminate a large Soviet bulge in the front lines near the city of Kursk. The plan called for a pincer attack from north and south to encircle Soviet forces. The southern thrust, the main weight of the offensive, was entrusted to General Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, which included 2 SS Panzer Corps under Paul Hauser. Its spearhead divisions, Leibstandard, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, represented the best-trained, best-equipped formations Germany could field. Each division had more than 300 tanks and assault guns, including the formidable Tiger I heavy tanks. Their soldiers were veterans of years of brutal warfare, confident in their superiority over the Red Army. But unknown to them, the Soviets had anticipated the attack and spent months preparing a vast defensive network of trenches, minefields, and anti-tank barriers. The SS Spearhead. The attack began on July 5, 1943, with an artillery barrage and the largest tank engagement in history. The SS Panzer divisions led the assault with ferocious determination. For days, they clawed their way forward through Soviet defenses, advancing yard by yard under constant artillery and air attacks. The Leibstandard, commanded by Sepp Dietrich, pushed toward the village of Prokhorovka, supported by Das Reich and Totenkopf on its flanks. The fighting was apocalyptic, fields ablaze, tanks locked in close combat, men battling in choking dust and smoke. On July 12 at Prokhorovka, over 700 tanks clashed in one of the most intense armored battles ever fought. The SS divisions destroyed hundreds of Soviet vehicles, but their own losses were severe. Soviet reserves flooded the battlefield, and the German offensive began to stall. The dream of a decisive victory at Kursk evaporated. Within weeks, Hitler called off the operation, fearing Allied landings in Italy. The end of the offensive spirit. Kursk marked a psychological turning point. The Waffen-SS divisions had fought with their usual ferocity, but the tide of war had shifted irreversibly. The Red Army had absorbed the German assault and launched powerful counterattacks that forced the Germans back toward the Dnieper River. For the first time, the Waffen-SS found itself fighting defensive battles, retreating across the same blood-soaked terrain it had conquered in 1941 and 1942. The myth of unstoppable German armor had been shattered. Still, the Waffen-SS retained its reputation for tenacity. In countless rear-guard actions, the SS divisions delayed Soviet advances long enough to allow other German units to withdraw in order. Their discipline and cohesion under pressure were unmatched. But the cost was devastating. Thousands of irreplaceable veterans were lost. Transformation and expansion. Even as the front collapsed, Himmler continued to expand the Waffen-SS. What had begun as a handful of elite divisions now grew into a massive multinational army. New divisions were created from foreign volunteers and conscripts. 11th SS Panzer Grenadier Division Nordland, composed mainly of Scandinavians. 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, formed from indoctrinated members of the Hitler Youth. 13th SS Mountain Division Handschar, made up of Bosnian Muslims. 15th and 19th SS Grenadier Divisions, recruited from Latvian and Estonian volunteers. These new units reflected Himmler's dream of a European crusade against Bolshevism. However, quality varied dramatically. Many of the later divisions lacked proper training, equipment, or experienced officers. The Waffen-SS was becoming an army in name more than in fact, a blend of elite formations and poorly trained foreign contingents. The Waffen-SS in the West and South. While the Eastern Front consumed most SS divisions, others were deployed elsewhere. Following Italy's surrender in September 1943, the Leibstandard was sent to northern Italy, where it conducted brutal anti-partisan operations and suppressed Italian resistance forces. These actions often involved mass executions and the destruction of entire villages. Meanwhile, in France, the newly formed 12th SS, Hitlerjugend Division, was completing its training. Composed largely of teenage soldiers led by hardened SS veterans, it embodied the fanatical devotion Himmler sought to instill in all his troops. By the end of 1943, the Waffen-SS fielded 7 panzer divisions and dozens of infantry, mountain, and cavalry divisions. Its total strength exceeded 500,000 men, making it a state within a state, Himmler's personal army, answering only to Hitler. Declined behind the illusion of strength. Outwardly, the Waffen-SS seemed invincible, modern, powerful, and ideologically unified. In reality, its strength was beginning to hollow out. Casualties were mounting faster than replacements could arrive. Equipment shortages were chronic. Many of the new divisions existed only on paper, or were divisions in name, but regiments in strength. Still, propaganda continued to portray the Waffen-SS as the elite spearhead of the Reich. Posters, films, and newsreels glorified its soldiers as Europe's crusaders against communism. The myth was powerful enough to keep volunteers flowing in from across the continent, even as Germany's situation grew increasingly desperate. The gathering storm. By the beginning of 1944, the Waffen-SS faced enemies on all fronts. In the east, the Red Army prepared a series of massive offensives that would drive deep into occupied Europe. In the west, the Allies were about to launch Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy. The coming year would test the Waffen-SS as never before. Its elite divisions would fight in both theaters, in the hedgerows of France, in the ruins of Warsaw, and in the forests of the Ardennes. The age of conquest was over. The age of defensive desperation had begun. By early 1944, the once unstoppable Waffen-SS was being stretched to its limits. The Soviet juggernaut was pushing westward with renewed force, and in the west, the Allies were preparing for a long-awaited invasion of France. Yet despite mounting losses and dwindling resources, the Waffen-SS remained central to Hitler's hopes of turning the tide. The year 1944 would be one of relentless pressure, of heroic stands and brutal repressions, of fanaticism and collapse. The Waffen-SS, now numbering more than 600,000 men, fought on every front, from the beaches of Normandy to the ruins of Warsaw and the swamps of the Baltic. Normandy, the Waffen-SS faces the west. When the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944, several Waffen-SS divisions were among the most formidable defenders of occupied France. Chief among them were 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandard Adolf Hitler; 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich; 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen; 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg; 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. The 12th SS Hitlerjugend, composed mainly of fanatically indoctrinated 17 and 18-year-olds led by veteran SS officers, epitomized the ideological zeal of the organization's later years. Their youth was matched by their ferocity. They fought with a determination that stunned even hardened Allied troops. When the Allies attempted to expand their bridgeheads beyond Caen, the Hitlerjugend division counterattacked repeatedly, often at heavy cost. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the division held its ground for weeks, delaying the Allied breakout. British and Canadian forces reported encountering units that refused to surrender under any circumstances, fighting to the last man. But their tenacity came at a terrible price. The division suffered thousands of casualties, and many of its actions were accompanied by atrocities. SS soldiers executed Canadian prisoners of war, earning the division a grim reputation. Das Reich and the March of Terror. While the Hitlerjugend fought in Normandy, the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, became infamous for its actions during its movement north from southern France. Ordered to reinforce the Normandy front, the division faced constant attacks from French resistance fighters along the route. In retaliation, SS units carried out savage reprisals. The most notorious occurred in the village of Oradour-sur-Glane on June 10, 1944, where SS troops massacred 642 civilians, including women and children. The village was burned to the ground and left in ruins, a haunting symbol of the SS ruthlessness. By the time Das Reich reached Normandy, its strength had been badly reduced by Allied air attacks and partisan ambushes. It nonetheless joined the desperate battles around Caen and Falaise, fighting with grim determination as the Allies broke through the German lines. The collapse in France. As the Allied advance gathered momentum in late July 1944, the Waffen-SS divisions became the backbone of the German defense. The Leibstandard, Hohenstaufen, and Frundsberg divisions formed part of the German armored reserve committed to halting the Allied breakout during Operation Cobra. But Allied air superiority and overwhelming firepower proved decisive. The SS divisions fought ferociously in the Falaise pocket, attempting to hold open an escape route for encircled German forces. The fighting was desperate and chaotic. Entire SS battalions were wiped out. Thousands of men were killed or captured as the pocket collapsed in mid-August. When the survivors finally crossed the Seine River, the Waffen-SS divisions in France were shadows of their former selves. Their tanks were destroyed, their manpower decimated. Yet Hitler and Himmler immediately ordered them rebuilt, proof of the regime's determination to preserve its ideological elite even in the face of disaster. The Eastern Front, desperation and retribution. While the SS panzer divisions battled the Allies in France, other Waffen-SS formations were locked in a struggle for survival against the Soviets. The Red Army's Operation Bagration, launched in June 1944, obliterated Army Group Center and shattered German defenses in Belarus. SS divisions stationed on the Eastern Front, such as Totenkopf, Viking, and Nordland, were thrown into desperate rearguard actions to slow the Soviet advance. They fought around the Baltic states, Poland, and Ukraine, often encircled and outnumbered. The Viking division, composed of Germans and Scandinavian volunteers, distinguished itself in these battles, but even its discipline could not halt the Soviet tide. The Waffen-SS's ideological training, which taught its men never to retreat, often turned rearguards into suicidal stands. The war saw uprising and crimes of vengeance. In August 1944, the Polish Home Army rose in revolt against German occupation. Hitler ordered the uprising crushed with utmost brutality, and it was the Waffen-SS that carried out his orders. SS units under the command of SS General Erich von dem Bach-Zaluski and the notorious Oskar Dirlewanger were unleashed upon Warsaw. The Dirlewanger Brigade, composed of criminals and convicts, committed horrifying atrocities, massacring tens of thousands of civilians in the Walla district and systematically destroying entire neighborhoods. The Kaminsky Brigade, made up of Russian collaborators within the Waffen-SS, added to the orgy of looting and murder. The suppression of the uprising left over 200,000 civilians dead and the city in ruins. Even some German officers were appalled by the scale of the violence. These actions cemented the Waffen-SS's reputation as not only a military force, but also an instrument of terror and retribution, holding the Baltic and Carpathians. In the north, the Nordland and Latvian SS divisions fought tenaciously to defend the Baltic states, earning a grudging respect even from their enemies for their endurance. Many of these troops, particularly the Baltic and Ukrainian volunteers, fought with a fatalistic determination, knowing that surrender to the Soviets meant certain death. In the Carpathian Mountains in Hungary, SS Mountain and Cavalry divisions resisted the Red Army's advance throughout late 1944. Despite fierce resistance, it was clear that the tide of war had turned irrevocably. The year of attrition. By the end of 1944, the Waffen-SS was both larger and weaker than ever before. It fielded over 38 divisions, but many existed only on paper, understrength, poorly equipped, and manned by inexperienced or unwilling recruits. What had once been an elite, racially selective corps was now a patchwork of nationalities, ideologies, and desperation. Himmler's insistence on quantity over quality diluted the Waffen-SS's effectiveness, even as its name continued to evoke fear and fanatic loyalty. But the war was not yet over. In the final months of the conflict, Hitler would call upon his SS divisions one last time for a final, futile offensive that he hoped might turn the war around. By the final months of 1944, Nazi Germany stood on the brink of destruction. The Red Army was closing in from the east, while Allied forces in the west had crossed France and were approaching the German border. Yet Adolf Hitler still dreamed of a reversal of fortune, a strike so bold it might shatter the Allied coalition and prolong the war. The weapon he chose for this desperate gamble was the Waffen-SS. Despite catastrophic losses, its armored divisions remained among the most cohesive, disciplined, and politically reliable formations in the German military. Their loyalty to Hitler was absolute, and their commanders, battle-hardened veterans like Sepp Dietrich and Joachim Paper, were willing to fight to the end. This would be their last great campaign. Hitler's final gamble, Operation Walk dem Rhein. In December 1944, Hitler launched Operation Walk dem Rhein, better known as the Battle of the Bulge. The plan was to strike through the Ardennes forest, punch a hole in the Allied front, and seize the critical port of Antwerp. The offensive aimed to split the British and American armies, forcing the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace. The key role in the assault fell to the 6th SS Panzer Army, commanded by SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, one of Hitler's oldest loyalists. This army was composed largely of elite Waffen-SS units, including 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen, 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. Despite the impressive order of battle, most of these divisions were shadows of their former selves, under strength short on fuel, and filled with inexperienced replacements. Still, they were considered the best troops Germany could muster for one final offensive in the West. The offensive begins. At dawn on December 16, 1944, the German artillery opened fire along a 100-mile front in the snow-covered Ardennes. Thousands of guns thundered as SS and Wehrmacht divisions surged forward through the mist. In the north, the spearhead of the 6th SS Panzer Army struck toward Liège and Antwerp, led by Kampfgruppe Paper, a powerful armored battle group from the Leibstandard Division. Commanded by SS Standartenführer Joachim Paper, a charismatic and ruthless officer, the unit advanced rapidly in the first days of the offensive, capturing American fuel depots and overrunning defensive positions. But Paper's advance also left a trail of atrocities. On December 17th, near the town of Malmedy, SS troops executed 84 captured American soldiers, one of several massacres committed during the campaign. The killings outraged Allied forces and guaranteed that no mercy would be shown to SS prisoners thereafter. The offensive falters. Despite early gains, the offensive soon bogged down. The terrain of the Ardennes, dense forests and narrow roads, favored the defenders. American resistance stiffened, and Allied air power, once the weather cleared, devastated German supply lines. The Waffen-SS divisions, lacking fuel and ammunition, were forced to abandon vehicles and fight on foot. By late December, the offensive had stalled completely. Sepp Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army failed to achieve its objectives, and by early January 1945, the Germans were in retreat. The Ardennes offensive had consumed the last reserves of Germany's armored strength. What Hitler had hoped would be a war-changing victory had instead hastened the end. A war of extinction, the Eastern Front erupts. While the SS divisions bled in the snow of Belgium, catastrophe was unfolding in the East. On January 12, 1945, the Red Army launched the Vistula Oder Offensive, an overwhelming assault that shattered the German front in Poland and drove to within 50 miles of Berlin within weeks. In the chaos, Waffen-SS formations were thrown piecemeal into the fight to stem the Soviet advance. The Totenkopf, Viking, and Nordland divisions fought desperate delaying actions in Poland and East Prussia, while the Latvian and Estonian SS divisions were annihilated trying to hold the Baltic coast. The Waffen-SS now functioned as the Reichsführer Brigade, rushed from one collapsing front to another in futile efforts to hold the line. Their courage and discipline were undeniable, but they could no longer change the outcome of the war. The last defense of Germany. In February 1945, the 6th SS Panzer Army, fresh from its failure in the Ardennes, was redeployed east to defend Hungary and Austria, the last major oil-producing regions under German control. The Waffen-SS played a leading role in Operation Frühlingserwachen, Spring Awakening, a counteroffensive launched near Lake Balaton in March 1945. It was Hitler's final large-scale attack. Once again, the Leibstandard Das Reich and Hitlerjugend divisions spearheaded the assault. But this time, Soviet forces were ready. The offensive collapsed within days, and the SS units were driven back in disarray toward Vienna. Enraged by the defeat, Hitler accused the Waffen-SS of cowardice, a bitter irony given their record of near-fanatical endurance. In response, Sepp Dietrich reportedly ordered his troops to remove their SS insignia in disgust, declaring that his men had been sacrificed for a hopeless cause. The Death March. By April 1945, the war was in its final agony. The Waffen-SS fought street by street in Vienna, Budapest, and finally Berlin itself. The Nordland Division, composed largely of Scandinavian volunteers, defended the government district in Berlin alongside remnants of the Leibstandard and Hitler Youth units. They fought to the last bullet in the ruins around the Reich Chancellery and Reichstag, refusing to surrender even as Soviet artillery pulverized the city. When Hitler took his own life on April 30th, Waffen-SS troops were among his last defenders. In the West, other SS divisions surrendered to American and British forces, preferring capture by the Western Allies over the vengeance of the Soviets. Yet many SS soldiers, particularly those of non-German origin, were handed over to the Red Army. Most never returned. The collapse of the SS myth. The end came swiftly. On May 8, 1945, Germany capitulated. The Waffen-SS, once hailed as the elite vanguard of a new European order, was shattered. Its survivors faced imprisonment, trials, and a legacy forever tainted by the crimes committed in the name of ideology. At Nuremberg, the Waffen-SS was declared a criminal organization responsible for atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war across Europe. Though some tried to argue that the combat soldiers of the SS were distinct from the concentration camp guards, the moral line between them had long since vanished. A legacy of fanaticism and tragedy. The Ardennes Offensive had been the Waffen-SS's last display of operational strength. It revealed both the courage and the moral corruption at the heart of the organization, soldiers capable of immense bravery, yet fighting for a cause that had already condemned them. In its final months, the Waffen-SS embodied the contradiction of the Third Reich itself: discipline and destruction, faith and fanaticism, loyalty and moral collapse. Its end mirrored that of the regime it served, defiant, bloody, and doomed. As Germany's fortunes declined after Stalingrad and Kursk, Heinrich Himmler and the SS leadership faced a dire problem: the need for more men to sustain the ever-expanding front. The once racially pure Waffen-SS had been envisioned as an elite corps composed exclusively of Germans and so-called Germanic volunteers from Northern Europe. But by 1943, battlefield losses and the demands of total war forced a radical transformation. To keep its divisions filled, the Waffen-SS opened its ranks to foreigners from across Europe and beyond, creating a vast array of legions, brigades, and divisions, some motivated by ideology, others by desperation or coercion. What emerged was one of the most diverse yet contradictory military forces in history, a European army fighting for a regime that preached racial hierarchy. Himmler's vision: a Germanic Empire army. Himmler dreamed of a Waffen-SS that transcended national boundaries, a racial brotherhood of Aryan warriors united under Nazi ideology. He believed that Northern Europeans, Dutch, Flemish, Danes, Norwegians, and even some Frenchmen, shared common Germanic blood and could be molded into reliable SS soldiers. As early as 1940, recruitment offices were opened in occupied Western Europe. The propaganda portrayed the Waffen-SS as a crusade against Bolshevism, a noble defense of European civilization against the threat of communism. Posters, films, and radio broadcasts promised volunteers a chance to fight shoulder to shoulder with Germany for the future of the West. At first, the response was limited. But after 1942, as the war turned against Germany and anti-communist sentiment grew in occupied nations, recruitment accelerated, especially among right-wing and fascist sympathizers. The Germanic divisions. The early wave of foreign recruitment produced several Germanic divisions within the Waffen-SS. 5th SS Panzer Division Viking, formed in 1941 from volunteers from Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Flanders, and Finland. Commanded by Felix Steiner, the division fought on the Eastern Front and gained a formidable reputation for discipline and combat effectiveness. 11th SS Volunteer Panzer Grenadier Division Nordland, created in 1943, composed mainly of Scandinavian volunteers, later fighting heroically in the defense of Narva and Berlin. 23rd SS Volunteer Panzer Grenadier Division Nederland, composed largely of Dutch volunteers, serving alongside Nordland on the Eastern Front. 27th SS Volunteer Division Langmark, drawn from Flemish recruits, noted for its stubborn defense during the final battles in Pomerania and Berlin. These divisions represented the ideal foreign SS formations, volunteers who were racially acceptable to Nazi standards and motivated by anti-communist conviction. Many of their officers were Germans, while the rank and file came from across occupied Europe. Despite heavy losses, these units often fought with distinction, earning respect even among Wehrmacht commanders. Yet their loyalty was to the Waffen-SS and its ideology, not to the German nation, a nuance that Himmler celebrated as the foundation of his future Germanic Reich. The non-Germanic and Eastern units. As the war dragged on and casualties soared, the SS abandoned its earlier racial restrictions altogether. From 1943 onward, recruitment extended to Slavic, Baltic, Balkan, and even Asian populations. These new formations varied greatly in quality, cohesion, and purpose. Some notable examples included 13th Waffen Mountain Division of the SS Handschar, 1st Croatian, formed in 1943 from Bosnian Muslims under German officers. Himmler considered Islam a martial faith and believed these men could be molded into loyal SS soldiers. Initially successful in anti-partisan operations, the division later mutinied in France before being sent back to the Balkans, where it was eventually disbanded. 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS Galicia, 1st Ukrainian, composed mainly of Ukrainian nationalists seeking independence from the Soviet Union. It fought the Red Army in 1944 but was destroyed in the Brody Pocket. Surviving members were reformed into smaller units that fought until war's end. 15th and 19th Waffen Grenadier Divisions of the SS, made up of Latvian volunteers and conscripts. These divisions fought with grim determination, knowing that capture by the Soviets meant execution. 20th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, 1st Estonian, composed of Estonian volunteers who resisted Soviet reoccupation of their homeland. 21st Waffen Mountain Division of the SS Skanderbeg, 1st Albanian, poorly trained and plagued by desertion, it failed in its operations against Yugoslav partisans. 29th and 30th Waffen Grenadier Divisions of the SS, composed of Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians, including former Soviet POWs and collaborators. These non-Germanic units often lacked the ideological fervor of the earlier SS formations. Many were motivated by survival, revenge against the Soviets, or the promise of food and protection for their families. Others were forced into service. The Dirlewanger and Kaminsky brigades, the SS at its worst. Among the most infamous of all Waffen-SS formations were the 36th Waffen Grenadier Division, Dirlewanger, and the 29th Waffen Grenadier Division, Kaminsky. The Dirlewanger Brigade, commanded by Oskar Dirlewanger, was composed of convicted criminals, poachers, and political prisoners. It became notorious for atrocities committed in Belarus, Poland, and Slovakia. During the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, Dirlewanger's men massacred tens of thousands of civilians in acts of unimaginable brutality. The Kaminsky Brigade, drawn from Russian collaborators, gained similar notoriety for looting, rape, and murder during anti-partisan operations. Even SS leadership, accustomed to violence, eventually found the unit uncontrollable. Kaminsky himself was executed by the SS in 1944 after his men's excesses became politically embarrassing. These formations embodied the moral decay of the late-war Waffen-SS, brutal, lawless, and entirely divorced from the military ideals it once claimed to uphold. The end of the European Army. By 1945, the Waffen-SS included men from over 30 nations, including volunteers or conscripts from France, Belgium, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Italy, Croatia, Ukraine, and even India. Yet the vision of a united European crusade was collapsing. Many foreign SS soldiers were fighting not for Hitler but against communism or simply to avoid death. Some mutinied, others deserted, and many perished in hopeless rearguard actions as the Allies closed in. In Berlin's final defense, foreign SS volunteers from the Nordland, Charlemagne, French, and Netherlands divisions fought side by side with German veterans in the ruins of the Reich capital. Their stand was fanatical, fueled by despair rather than victory, but it fulfilled Himmler's dream, in one dark sense. Europe's sons united under the Black SS banner, fighting and dying together for a lost cause. Aftermath and reckoning. When the war ended, most foreign SS members faced grim fates. The Soviets executed thousands of captured Baltic, Ukrainian, and Russian SS men as traitors. Many Western Europeans who had joined the Waffen-SS were tried as collaborators in their home countries, some imprisoned, others executed. Yet the myth of the Waffen-SS as a purely military, apolitical elite endured in post-war memory. Former officers and sympathizers attempted to portray the foreign volunteers as idealists fighting for Europe's freedom from communism. Modern historians, however, have thoroughly dismantled this myth, revealing the deep complicity of the Waffen-SS, foreign and German alike, in the crimes of the Nazi regime. A legacy of contradictions. The foreign legions of the Waffen-SS reflected the contradictions of the Nazi vision itself, the attempt to build a racially pure empire through the service of men deemed racially inferior, the blending of idealism, coercion, and brutality, the transformation of nationalism into fanaticism. By the war's end, these units had fought bravely in some cases, monstrously in others, but all were part of an organization whose very foundation rested on racial hatred and ideological war. The dream of a European SS had died in the rubble of Berlin, another casualty of the delusions it was built upon to be why the spring of 1945, the once proud Waffen-SS, the self-proclaimed elite of Hitler's empire, lay in ruins. Its divisions, shattered and scattered, fought desperate last stands across a collapsing Reich. What had begun a decade earlier as a small, ideologically driven guard unit had become a sprawling, multinational army, an army now fighting not for victory, but for survival. In those final chaotic weeks, the Waffen-SS embodied both the fanaticism and the futility of Nazi Germany's dying struggle. The final battles. As the Allies closed in from all sides, remnants of SS divisions held scattered defensive lines across Europe. In the east, the Viking, Totenkopf, and Nordland divisions fought savage rearguard actions along the Oder and in Pomerania, attempting to delay the Soviet drive toward Berlin. The Latvian and Estonian SS divisions fought to the death in the Baltic states, buying time for civilians to evacuate by sea. In Hungary, the 6th SS Panzer Army, including the Leibstandard, Hitlerjugend, and Das Reich divisions, launched Operation Frühlingsverwachen, Spring Awakening, in March 1945, Hitler's last offensive. Their goal was to secure the oil fields near Lake Balaton, Germany's last vital fuel source. The attack failed almost immediately. Soviet counterattacks crushed the exhausted SS divisions and sent them retreating toward Austria. In the west, the Hohenstaufen and Frundsberg divisions fought delaying actions against the advancing Americans, while remnants of Das Reich and Leibstandard withdrew into Bavaria and Austria. The Waffen-SS still fought hard, but its ranks were filled with teenagers, old men, and foreign recruits with little hope of survival. The fall of Berlin. The last act of the Waffen-SS played out in the ruins of Berlin. There, amid the rubble and flames of the capital, units of the Nordland Division, reinforced by the remnants of Leibstandard, the French Charlemagne Division, and desperate Volkssturm militias, defended the government quarter to the end. For the foreign volunteers, Scandinavians, Dutch, French, and others, the final battle carried an air of tragic symbolism. Many had been told they were fighting to save Europe from Bolshevism. Now, they fought only to delay the inevitable, dying in the shattered streets around the Reich Chancellery and the Reichstag. When Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, Waffen-SS troops were among his last defenders. On May 2nd, the surviving SS units in Berlin surrendered to the Red Army. Few survived captivity. Soviet retribution was swift and merciless. Surrender and chaos. Elsewhere in Europe, SS divisions surrendered piecemeal. Some, such as the Leibstandard and Hitlerjugend, laid down their arms to American forces in Austria to avoid capture by the Soviets. Others, particularly Eastern European and Baltic formations, attempted to flee westward, only to be forcibly repatriated by the Western Allies to face execution or imprisonment in the USSR. The Waffen-SS, once numbering nearly 900,000 men, ceased to exist. Its surviving members were rounded up and placed in prisoner-of-war camps. Many faced harsh interrogations and reprisals. For thousands, especially those implicated in war crimes, there would be no mercy. The Nuremberg Judgment. In the aftermath of the war, the world sought justice. The International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg placed the Schutzstaffel SS, including the Waffen-SS, on trial as part of the Nazi state apparatus. The verdict was unequivocal. The SS was declared a criminal organization responsible for crimes against humanity, including the persecution and extermination of millions of civilians. The tribunal found that the Waffen-SS, while a military branch, had been deeply complicit in these crimes, both through its direct participation in massacres and its role in supporting the broader machinery of Nazi terror. However, the court allowed for the possibility that some conscripts and individuals forced into the Waffen-SS might not bear personal responsibility, recognizing that not all had volunteered willingly. Post-war myths and rehabilitation efforts. In the years that followed, surviving SS veterans attempted to reshape their legacy. Organizations such as HIAG, founded in West Germany in the 1950s, sought to portray the Waffen-SS as a purely military force, an elite army separate from the atrocities of the concentration camps and the Holocaust. These veterans emphasized their combat record and claimed they had fought honorably against communism, insisting they were soldiers like any other. For decades, this narrative found some sympathy in post-war Germany and among certain far-right movements in Europe. But historical research has thoroughly debunked these claims. Archival evidence and eyewitness testimony have shown that Waffen-SS divisions participated in systematic atrocities across every front: mass executions of civilians in Poland and the Soviet Union, the murder of prisoners in France, and anti-partisan operations that destroyed entire villages. The Waffen-SS was not merely a fighting force. It was a political army created and shaped by Nazi ideology and inseparable from the crimes of the regime it served. The fate of its leaders. The senior commanders of the Waffen-SS met varied fates. Heinrich Himmler, its creator, attempted to flee under a false identity, but was captured by British forces and committed suicide on May 23, 1945. Sepp Dietrich, commander of the Leibstandard, was sentenced to life imprisonment for war crimes, later reduced to 25 years. He was released in 1955. Joachim Paper, leader of the Malmedy massacre during the Ardennes Offensive, was sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment. Released in 1956, he was murdered in France in 1976 by unknown assailants. Paul Hauser, architect of the Waffen-SS's military structure, became a leading figure in the post-war veterans organization HIAG, writing books defending the SS reputation. Others, like Theodor Eicke of the Totenkopf Division, had died long before the war's end, killed in combat or hunted down by Allied forces. Legacy and historical reckoning. The legacy of the Waffen-SS remains deeply controversial. Its soldiers were among the most skilled, disciplined, and fanatical of the war, yet they were also perpetrators or silent witnesses to some of its worst crimes. Modern historians view the Waffen-SS as the militarized arm of the Nazi state's racial and ideological mission. It was not a neutral fighting force, but an organization designed to wage total war, both militarily and morally, against those deemed enemies of the Reich. While some divisions fought with tactical brilliance on the battlefield, their achievements cannot be separated from the genocidal context of their service. Behind their discipline and bravery lay a doctrine of racial hatred, political obedience, and moral corruption. Epilogue. Lessons from the black uniform. By the time the last Waffen-SS soldiers laid down their arms in May 1945, the ideals that had driven them, loyalty, racial purity, and the dream of a new order, had been reduced to ashes. The black uniforms that once symbolized fear and power became emblems of fanaticism and moral blindness. The men who wore them fought to the end for a cause that had long since lost any legitimacy, a cause that turned courage into cruelty and obedience into complicity. Today, the story of the Waffen-SS serves as both a warning and a lesson. That even the most disciplined and devoted soldiers, when driven by ideology and blind loyalty, can become instruments of destruction.